Hi, everybody. This is Steve Monday, Chief Forecaster with Rowan County Weather, and we're back with another edition of the Rowan County Weather Podcast. We've had all kinds of things that we've talked about on the podcast before, but one thing we've never really gotten into is things that really can kind of personally affect anyone watching the podcast. It's no secret that if you're living and moving around in this world today, one thing you absolutely have to have is insurance of some kind. And so we've got Rebecca Sutton with us, who is a local insurance agent, and she's here to talk to us about insurance. And Rebecca, first of all, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. And so go ahead and, first of all, tell everyone about yourself and your insurance and all that. And we'll just kind of go from there.
Okay. So again, my name is Rebecca Sutton. I work for the Compass Agency. We represent or we have access to a lot of carriers. So I've been in insurance for going on 8 years, and even in my short venture, I've seen such drastic changes. But clearly, as you said, the insurance rates they just keep going up and up and up. And I know me personally on a daily basis, I'm getting, why the heck is this happening? And I just felt, a little bit of insight just behind the scenes, possibly to answer some of the questions and hopefully clarify some of the things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing you mentioned, insurance rates keep going up and up and up, and obviously for folks that drive on a daily basis or have a car and just, maybe they're older in life and they just, use the car to go maybe to the grocery store once a week, to church, things like that. No matter who you are, over the last couple of years, your insurance rates for auto have been going up more and more. Can you give some insight as to why that might be happening?
Sure. So obviously, specifically North Carolina, we used to be kind of low on as far as the expensive, throughout the country. But since we've seen such an influx of people come into this area, obviously more people, more accidents, more exposure type of thing. So unfortunately, what at the end of the day, not to I don't want to bore anybody with, the details, but at the end of the day, insurance is a business, right? So we're here to try to obviously pay the bills, turn a profit. Whenever we continuously have more and more claims, more and more, just it's costing more and more money to live. Clearly, that's going to trickle down into everything else, every other aspect. And it's unfortunately taken its toll on the insurance industry as well.
Let me ask you, just over the last couple of years, I know one of the things that really kind of changed with COVID, that was kind of a complete pivot from what we had done in all the years that anyone's been driving an automobile. For up and coming young drivers at that point during COVID, they didn't have to do the driving test. They didn't have to take driver's ed. They basically were kind of given a little bit of a pass because of the situation they were in. Have you seen like more incidents and things that happen with them, more claims from that particular age group, or is it still just kind of all over?
Well, young drivers, bottom line is
Hmm.
they're not as good.
Yeah,
So I don't know how else to put that, but
right.
we have a whole lot more risk. So for young drivers, personally, you have a 16-year-old, I have a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate that we have to pay these rates, but what it comes down to is there's inexperienced operator surcharges that are put on new drivers. If you get your license at 16 or if you get your license at 30 for the first time. For the first 3 years, there's surcharges, the inexperienced operator surcharges. And that's just to, upfront try to recoup the possibility. And again, insurance just kind of comes down to a risk. Hey, this is what you look like on paper. So we're going to kind of charge you as such, So I know personally, it's really stinks having to pay those surcharges, but I mean, coming from my end, I completely see where it's coming from because I mean, we have the distracted driving. Now I've threatened my daughter within an inch of her life that if I ever see her texting, driving, any kind of distraction, that we're gonna hit that we're gonna hit that hard and have to completely reevaluate, our stance on stuff. But um I don't personally. see where like the kids who come out of not having to do a driving test has been necessarily like worse.
Right.
But I was initially just kind of like, I don't know if this is a good move. I don't, but I don't get to make the decisions on that end. So
So, you mentioned you have a 16-year-old. I've got a 16-year-old. We've honestly known each other our children's entire lives. They went to
yeah,
preschool together, and then magically reappeared together in middle school and now high school. So we've seen each of our
wow.
daughters grow up. And they are getting ready to start driving. They've doing the learner's permit process and all that right now. One of the things that my wife Amy and I had done is we got Life 360 for our
Mhm.
daughter, and that way we can keep up with, first of all, knowing if she is going to be driving fast, where she's at, all those kind of things. And I know it's kind of a big brother effect, but do you encourage things like that for any of your clients that have children that are getting ready to start driving in terms of trying to keep an eye on?
I mean, of course,
Yeah.
I've I've heard, especially from, let's use my mom as an example. She's like, kids these days, or parents these days, are so lucky to have something to be able to track it. And I'm like, I can see the other side of that because I see, I can look up. Not that I am constantly looking, where she's going, but I just for fun looked at a trip one time and saw that there was some speeding action going on, and I was like, come on, come on, we know better. Your mom's an insurance agent. Come on, you know better. So, I mean, it's good. It's proactive.
So, with the young, inexperienced drivers, I've seen, both of our children go to Carson. And one of the things I've seen, I don't know if you've ever been through the car rider line there. I've gone through a few times. Most of the time, my wife's picking my daughter up because they are so close together in the school that my wife teaches at, and of course, Carson, where my daughter goes. But going through there, you see all kinds of different vehicles that some of the younger kids are driving. I mean, some of them you can tell are old hand-me-downs, and some are just, where their parents just bought them what they could just to get them out there and get the experience. And then there are others that are like Corvettes and Teslas and some higher end vehicles. And one of the myths that I've heard, and even back when I first started driving, was if you have a really expensive car, your insurance is going to be that much more expensive. Is that really a myth, or is that really kind of apply to the age and experience of the driver, and the car is kind of just secondary?
So that plays a big factor. I mean, if you think about you put your kid in a 20-year car, 20-year-old vehicle and don't have like physical coverage, so it's liability only, then you're going to be paying a whole lot less, even for a new driver, for putting a brand new driver in like the Corvette, because I've seen the same one. And it's kind of, I do look at some of the cars in the parking lot and I'm just like, this is wild, because my first thought, of course, in my line of work is just like, how much are they paying in insurance? Because that is just wild to me. But especially for new drivers or anybody with any kind of checker driving past, if you have a history of wrecks or tickets, and you put yourself in a vehicle that is way more expensive, you know, um, I'm drawing a blank, but the collision portion of that is going to be very expensive. So it does, the vehicle plays a major factor. The driver plays a major factor. So
So a lot of folks, when they start getting insurance, especially whether it's, whether they're a first time driver themselves, like, again, they maybe, we've seen with some of the millennials that are starting to get older now, that when they first started out, they didn't want to do driving. They did like Uber and all that kind of stuff. And basically let someone else do the driving for them. But as they've
mhm,
gotten older, they wanted to be a little bit more independent and not have to depend on the Uber driver to pick them up. So some of these folks are getting insurance at like age 25, for the first time.
yeah.
With that said, a lot of folks I think want to go with some baseline coverage, just get out as cheap as they possibly can, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I also think about it from my own personal aspects of I had my dad was in a really bad auto accident in 1999 where it wasn't his fault. He just happened to be the victim of the accident. The person who hit him was actually uninsured. And so obviously, from your own experience, well, whose insurance is going to pay for that? Well, it ends up being the
Mhm.
victim of the accident. So his coverage, even though he didn't have baseline coverage, he really didn't have, the top of the line either to really kind of help really supplement that entire accident.
Mhm.
So a lot of things had to happen, about folks going back and forth to like mediation and different things like that to get it all resolved. What's your recommendation for folks who maybe are looking and going, well, I don't want the sales pitch, but I also want the truth. What's your recommendation to folks who are maybe getting ready to get insurance and they go, I'm going to get out as cheap as I possibly can? Because there's obviously the you get what you pay for factor even in insurance.
That's right. So I definitely was going to start with that.
Yeah,
So technically, in the state of North Carolina, you can have state minimum limits, which is it's. I would never recommend it.
yeah,
Um, Not coming from a sales pitch, but just coming from vulnerability. So if we do like uh, state minimum only has $25,000 property damage. So if you go out and you are responsible for totaling, say, like a brand new Tahoe, and you have only $25,000 property damage, then that's the max your insurance policy is going to pay out. So if you're responsible for a $75,000 vehicle, which I think that's very, very conservative for some of the ones that I've seen, then ultimately your policy pays out $25,000. There's another $50,000. So that's
yeah,
going to come from you. And, where, however they have to get it. And then for backup, you do have the uninsured, underinsured motorist part of your policy, which will hopefully, help. But if you have those smaller limits too, then your policy is only going to pay out 25,000. So even with both policies, paying out, we still only have $50,000. We still have a big gap. So the higher limits, obviously, we're going to pay a little bit more. But I've ran some side by side, and state minimum versus even going to like $100,000 property damage. Yeah, it's a difference of 20-30 dollars a month. Sometimes that, again, that varies, but just for simplicity, 20-30 dollars a month. But in the grand scheme of things, coming off of 25 or 20-30 dollars a month versus 25 grand on the back end is, it makes so much more sense in my mind.
definitely. Well, let's talk about towing because I know sometimes folks need that and roadside assistance, but a lot of folks opt to not do that. I actually, full disclosure for folks that are watching, I actually do have a Tesla that I drive on my own, and up to the point that I got the Tesla, I never went with towing or roadside assistance. I
Mm,
decided to with the Tesla because the simple fact is if something happens to that thing, it's got to be put on a flatbed truck and taken to wherever it's going to go. There's no just jump starting it on the side of the road or anything like that. So I opted to go for it. And it's not really that expensive in the grand scheme of things per month. But for folks that are watching who go, I just have no interest in that, what would be your recommendation for them in terms of the towing and roadside assistance to add on?
Um, so unfortunately for the tone and labor or tone and roadside assistance, every carrier has their own definition of. Now, I mean, base, it's like, hey, we'll get you where you need to go. We're going to pay $100, you pay the rest. And, for example, but some carriers will vary. So that's definitely a question whoever your carrier is, they might be able to better answer your specific tone and labor opportunities. But again, whenever it comes down to difference of monthly premium, it's not much. It's
Yeah.
really not much.
Yeah, especially when you consider what the towing bill might be if,
Exactly.
if you're coming out of pocket for it. So we've talked about auto insurance. I know you obviously offer more than just auto. So tell me about the other forms of insurance you offer and which ones could be very beneficial for folks, especially in Rowan County and the surrounding counties.
Okay. So we have home, we have life, we have commercial. Um, that's our top. We have access to pretty much all of it. But as far as what we have that we write on a regular basis is going to be home, auto, life insurance, and commercial insurance. And as far as Rowan County, we have a lot of industrial type things around here. We definitely have a big market for that. That's essential because you know the exposure is huge. We don't want somebody who's uninsured coming on our property, digging up a bunch of stuff and then messing up, something with no backup. Because unfortunately, as a homeowner, like if I get somebody who's unlicensed and uninsured to come in and redo my bathroom, and then they completely tear it up, plumbing's wrong, then I have a big leak, then unfortunately that leaves me vulnerable, because not every single time, but most of the time I'm pretty comfortable in saying that if it's just craftsmanship that was absolutely terrible and creates this huge mess, your homeowner's insurance isn't necessarily supposed to be on the hook for that. Like, just because you pay pennies on the dollar for something to happen does not mean that your insurance carrier is obligated to fix that mess. You know. So as far as commercial insurance, anytime you're shopping for it, or I'm sorry, anytime you're hiring somebody who's like a licensed contractor, something like that, definitely make sure that they have that, the license and insurance on the back end of it, because it's essential.
Absolutely. Well, you're giving me a chance to segue here. The person who, or the company that actually sponsors the podcast is William Ryan Enterprises, and they actually just did a master bathroom remodel in my home. So it's interesting you mentioned, if you did a bathroom remodel. We just did one, and these folks did a fantastic job. They're located at 1600 North Main Street in China Grove. If you're familiar with the Old Grove Supply Building, that's where they are. It's William Ryan Flooring and Supplies in that building. And then they also have William Ryan Roofing as well, so they can do pretty much everything with your home. They are licensed and they can certainly help you out. So certainly make sure to check them out. And if you've been watching the podcast and the episode, all you got to do is look at the top of the screen. Their QR code and everything has been up there off and on during the broadcast, so you can just scan that QR code and be taken directly to their website. But Rebecca, let's get back to you and some more insurance. So, you know, a lot of folks, obviously we've watched movies in the past, and I think immediately of like Doc Hollywood, and everybody pretty much that's at least my age and your age has watched Doc Hollywood, I'm sure. And one of the things in there is there's a character that Woody Harrelson plays, and he's all about selling insurance of all kinds. And at one point, he in the movie he says, "I'm thinking about moving out to California. I'm real keen on trying to take a whack at that earthquake insurance." Now, obviously, we don't need that here, from a regular basis, but we have seen earthquakes actually occur more and more frequently over the
Mhm.
past few years here. Is that something that North Carolina actually allows you to offer?
Yeah. So, well, again, most carriers, from
Yeah.
all the carriers that I've actually ever dealt with, yes. That is not part of a normal homeowners, or like a regular homeowners. It's definitely an endorsement that can be added. It's not exactly cheap. And then the deductibles on those are typically pretty high as well. But again, like you said, there's not a huge necessity, but I can see, I guess, and I'm not a geologist, I'm probably
Sure.
using that word wrong, but I think we are on like a fault line, or there's one near
There are a
here.
few. Yeah, there are a
Yeah.
few around. Yeah,
So, I mean, it's there. The
yeah,
need, or
yeah. I just
possibility, I guess, is
I just
there.
think of the town of Sparta, who just
Yeah.
last year they had like earthquake after earthquake after earthquake, and obviously I can't think of anybody that I even know that lives here that has earthquake insurance, but I'm sure some of those folks were dealt a hard blow all of a sudden of going their whole life without having to deal with this, and then all of a sudden you had back to back days of it happening. And I know
Yeah.
some folks that might be watching this going, "Why are they talking about that?" But it obviously has happened and can happen. So
Well, it's funny. The situation was not funny, so let me
right,
clarify that. But
yeah,
after that happened, I had so many questions, and to be honest, I really didn't know too terribly much about that endorsement. But after the fact, used or had plenty of information given to me. But it is, I can see, where that there's been an influx of, especially people in that area. They've at least inquired about it.
sure. Also from a weather perspective, one of the things we've seen a lot happen lately is a lot more localized flooding. It doesn't matter if it's in Charlotte, Salisbury. We've seen it in even the rural areas of Rowan County lately. We've got probably a good inch and a half, 2 inches of rain coming Friday into Saturday, and that's a lot of rainfall in a short period of time that can bring up some localized flooding. Now, obviously, there are plenty of folks who live along the rivers and stuff that they're used to that. They live in a floodplain and they go ahead and get the flood insurance because they know from their own personal history. And I know it gets offered, even outside of floodplains, but talk to us about that because that's something that we're starting to see become essentially more and more of a necessity, especially as we add more and more homes and things around the area.
Right. So I actually just got through with a continuing education for flood yesterday.
Mhm.
So um it is obviously most mortgage companies, if you are in a floodplain, will say you have to have it. It is optional for those outside, but clearly anybody, it can happen to anybody. So we price them all the time. You know, a lot. The thing is there's a 30-day waiting period just because, we know that it's going to rain on Friday and Saturday, but we can't have somebody who's sitting there now, they're scared, and they say, hey, I need flood insurance and
Yep.
I need it to happen today because we have a potential flood coming on Friday. So there's mandatory 30-day waiting period unless you're closing it and it's needed. um but that's just kind of how, on the back end, to weed out people who are just going to say, hey, I need it because it's going to rain really hard this weekend, and then cancel it the following week or something. So we
Right.
try to avoid that because
Yeah.
anytime there's an application, there's so much other stuff that goes into it. Like,
Sure.
you gotta, you know, my work, the underwriter's work, all the other stuff. So it has to make sense. Just wanted to say, as far as a homeowner's insurance policy, just want everybody to be on the same page that it's not a maintenance policy.
Yeah.
So, as a homeowner, you have to do your due diligence, not just saying, hey, I need a licensed and insured contractor to come do my stuff, but I also have to maintain my property. So, if I see a leak, I don't just let it go. I fix it before it becomes,
Yep.
a big thing.
Yeah.
And we'll touch on roofs because that's a huge thing right now. It's on
It
a
is.
front page for a lot of the carriers. We're seeing very strict, tight regulations on roofs. And, my own personal experience, I bought a house that was a little bit older and I knew that I was eventually going to have to put a roof on it. But about 2 years ago, it came time. And trust me, if I knew any like obscure technicality that would have got my insurance company to pay for my roof, I would have found it. But I had to replace the roof, on
Yeah.
my own dime, which is never fun. 0 out of 10 would recommend.
Yeah.
And but I mean I had to because that's my responsibility as a
Right.
homeowner.
Yep.
So, and I just say that because I see I hear a lot of questions about, well, what do I have homeowners insurance for? We have homeowners insurance for sudden accidental occurrences.
Yep.
So maintenance is not covered.
Right.
You know, again, pipe burst while you left for work and now there's a big mess. That's something completely different. But if we notice like a slow leak,
Yep.
let's fix it. You know.
Yep. So from obviously we get this all the time, especially in the months that we have coming up. We're getting to the time of year where these things happen. Severe weather comes through. You get some damaging winds, but more specifically, you get hailstorms, which
Mhm,
does have a history of doing damage to roofs. Uh,
mhm.
that does potentially fall under coverage as long as you've been doing your due diligence and maintaining your roof, though.
Right.
Am I correct on that?
Yes. So before, obviously, I had a couple people go up there to see, just
Yeah.
like, hey,
Yeah. Yeah.
please, please tell me there's hail damage so I don't have to
Right.
pay for this, everything.
Right.
But they're like, there's a little bit, but ultimately
Not
it's always,
enough to. Yeah.
yeah. So there's, you know, degrees. If you have a little bit, then that doesn't mean that you're going to get a brand new roof.
Right.
And I do feel like this is a very good segue to say I hear this on a pretty good basis as well. Well, my neighbor got a brand new roof. You know, they had enough hail damage. Well, I've seen it. I've seen
Yeah.
direct next door neighbors.
Yeah.
This house or this roof has been absolutely just annihilated with hail. This
Right.
one, just a little bit.
Yep.
So it's not always necessarily just because my neighbor got it, that
Yep.
means I'm gonna get it.
Yeah, definitely. And I get that experience as well because, there's a lot of things that happen. What kind of canopy do you have around your home? And when I say canopy, I mean, do you have a lot of trees that are maybe taking more of the beating rather than your roof
Yeah.
from hail falling in, which, that's kind of a twofold deal where I don't, double-edged sword where I don't really recommend folks having a lot of trees around their home because
Nor
that
do
tree
I.
can come down. Yeah, yeah, that tree can come down just as and do just as much, if not more
Yep,
damage than just some hail.
yep,
Then you also get the situation of, and I see this happen all the time too from covering weather. It could be absolutely storming where you are, and you don't live that far from me in terms of as the crow
right.
flies, and completely sunny at my house like it is right now. And or it could be, a stone's throw. Let's just say you and I were neighbors and we live 4 houses apart from each other. It could be hailing at your house and 4 houses down doing nothing at mine
Yep.
other than
I know.
rain.
So
Yeah,
I mean, that's just a perfect example because
yeah,
that's how it's not always, we get the same thing on, I know we talked about auto insurance earlier, but I
mhm,
get the same thing sometimes for auto insurance.
mm,
Hey, my neighbor has, comparable car and they're paying so much less than what I am for auto
yeah,
insurance.
yeah,
And, my question is, well, what do you have going on that your neighbor doesn't? And I hate to be
right.
negative, but ultimately
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
just comes down to it because we're not just the exact same risk with the exact same cars, and then you guys should be paying the exact same amount. But start digging a little bit deeper and it turns out, hey, you have, couple of tickets. We
Yeah,
have some wrecks. Well,
yeah,
that in of itself, there's gonna be a huge difference. So that's I love neighbors. I
yeah.
got some good ones, but we're not
Not all equal. Yeah,
on insurance
yeah,
side of things. Just because they're your neighbor does not mean that you guys are the exact same risk.
yep, absolutely. Any other forms of insurance that we have not talked about that you offer that you want to make sure folks are aware of?
Well, we do offer life insurance.
Okay.
One thing as far as the rates for homeowners and auto insurance keep going up and up. Life insurance, we haven't seen too much of a increase. Well, from what I've seen. Of course, it's increased just a little bit, but depending on the type of policy that you get, that's pretty much always a locked in premium. So, say you get like a 20-year term that's $50 a month. I don't care what the economy does on the back end of it, then that's never going to change. So you're locked in. So that's definitely a benefit of that. And then of course, when you actually need, life insurance to help continue your family's way of life, and then so life insurance is definitely essential because in the event that we need it, and that's not something that anybody likes to think about, but
Mhm.
it's there because it happens. You can spend time mourning and getting just back to day
Yeah,
to day and not have to worry about, oh my gosh, how are we going to pay the mortgage, how are we going to pay all these bills, because you have that. So it's definitely an essential coverage as well. And I think the biggest hurdle through all that for life insurance is that everybody feels invincible, nothing's ever going to happen to them, and there's a whole industry because unfortunately it does.
yeah.
So
And I hate to say it this way too, but there are some folks who think, well, when I'm dead and gone, it doesn't matter. It's not my
yeah,
problem anymore. I'm dead and gone.
I know.
The problem is if they owe Uncle Sam money, Uncle Sam's going to get his money. It doesn't matter who he's getting it from.
Yeah.
And we've seen folks who have been just absolutely stunned by, well, my cousin so and so passed away, or my brother, and I'm executive of their estate, and now I've got to pay all these taxes they've owed for years. And
Hmm.
so it's always good to at least have that in the background just in case. Now, let me ask you this way. I know being a parent, I can get life insurance on my child. We can get life insurance on our spouses. Uh, can you get it beyond that? Like, let's say, for example, you've got a parent, your own parent, or that you want to maybe get life insurance on. Is that a possibility?
So you can.
Yeah.
There's eh, whoever's insured if they are over the age of 16. Sorry, I might have to fact check that one. Then if they are the named insured, then we do require a signature. So you can't just call me up and say, "Hey, my mom's in a nursing home, so I need to take out a life insurance policy on her." It's not that easy. It doesn't work that way. So we definitely, I have to visibly see who we're talking about, what we're talking about, actually sit down and have a conversation just to avoid any,
Potential scams.
yeah.
Yeah,
scams. I hate to use that word, but
yeah,
unfortunately, that's just kind of what it is.
right. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's we certainly live in that kind of environment now. I mean,
Yeah,
or even in the type of cyber world we live in now, folks could just reach out to you from anywhere and say, "I need insurance on my 85-year-old mother who has got dementia." And no, I'm not making fun of anyone's parents that are of that age and actually
right.
have dementia, but just using the example. So,
Yeah. No, and I
yeah,
mean, it does. That's what we're trying to avoid. So
yes,
there's checks and balances to make sure that that doesn't happen. And unfortunately, I got to ask a lot of questions, and sometimes it
yeah,
seems like it might be intrusive, but ultimately, my job is to maintain the integrity of this
yep,
life insurance company. So I will do whatever I have to take in
yep.
order, or whatever I have to do in order to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have one question though, for insurance. We're talking, in terms of the auto. I'm just thinking about this from past experiences I've had because I remember getting really irritated about it, but I also understand your side, in terms of an insurance, the insurance company side of it. So, you're driving along, doing your own thing, doing everything right, but unfortunately, someone around you is not doing everything right. They rear end you, they hit you in the side, front, whatever, and your car is damaged and has to go to a shop.
Hmm.
Now all of a sudden you need a rental car. You go to get the rental car and they tell you got to pay for it up front. I know a lot of folks get irritated with that because they're like, I didn't do anything wrong. I was just minding my own business. And now here I am getting hit from behind. So I know you offer, or at least if I'm understanding correctly from things I've looked at, rental car insurance is offered in some way, shape, or form. Is that right?
Yeah. So there, yes. Now, what we have to remember is that during a claims process, while I know it's frustrating, I
Yeah.
mean, I wish if I could just snap my fingers and everything was done,
Yep.
but there's a process, and it's a tried and true process. I'm not saying it's timely, but it's a tried and true process.
Right.
And it is, if you need a rental car immediately, I can't say that this adjuster has to pay for it. Like, if you need
Right.
it immediately, unfortunately, I mean, you're gonna have to pay for it up front. You will
Right.
be reimbursed for it on the back end,
Yep.
but I can't say, yes, this is gonna be paid for, we'll pay for it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
during the claims process, again, wish I could speed it up, but
Sure.
they're so busy, they're covered up. So I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's just working as fast and as hard as we can.
Absolutely. So for folks that have been watching, I know there could be some folks who have insurance right now and they go, wow, I like mine, but I want to see what Rebecca there has to offer. How can they get in touch with you and where can they find you to talk to you about insurance?
All right. So again, the Compass Agency, best bet is you can email me. It's Rebecca at thecompassagency.com, and that's Rebecca. You can give me a call, 704-847-4222. Ask for Rebecca. Those are definitely going to be the two best ways to get in contact with me. And then we can, even if you have small questions, it might seem silly or anything like that, but I walk through insurance policies all day, every day. I like to make sure that people know what they're buying, because just like we said, I see people who are like, "Hey, I'm just going to get the cheapest of the cheap," and then I'm like, "Let's take one step back. Do we know
Right.
what these numbers mean? Do
Yep.
we know that what this is going to do for you in the event of a claim?" And then they're just like, "No, I had no idea." And then it's essential to have an agent that's going to be, just
Thorough.
thorough
Yeah.
and know, you got to know what's going on. You got to know
Yep.
what you're paying for.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I like
Well,
cheap.
oh,
I'm
go ahead.
all about saving some money, but not at the expense of coverage. So,
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, before we wrap up, I always like to ask a couple of questions, of the folks that are on the podcast with me, and they're just kind of real, you know, light natured in heart. They don't really deal with anything that the person does, but I do know from experience of hanging out with you before, like I said, our daughters have grown up together and all that. And we've been on field trips and everything else. So one of the questions I always like to ask is pretty much everybody's into music in some way, shape, or form. So what would you say if you had to give an answer today, what would you say is the best song ever written?
Oh, goodness.
It's a tough one.
Ah, oof.
And
I
don't feel
don't
bad
get
because you have the
speechless
same
very
reaction.
often, but I don't know.
Yeah.
That is very tough.
Yeah.
That is
And
very
you and
tough.
you've had the same reaction everybody has, and I've had it turned around on me, and I've had that same reaction. It is very
Right.
tough to pick one.
It
So
just
what would you well,
I think a lot of that comes down to mood. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
if I'm cleaning the house, then let's turn on the loudest,
Yep.
you know, loudest stuff,
Yeah.
whatever. And then obviously if you're in a more somber mood, then there's a couple of songs for that
Yeah.
I would choose. So I think
Yeah.
it comes down to mood.
Gotcha. Well, let's do it this way. What would you say is your preferred music genre if you just got the choice to listen to? I know again
Guilt.
it comes down to I know it comes down to mood, but
Yeah.
everybody kind of has their favorite in terms of what style of music they like to listen to.
Man. God, I hate to skirt that question too, but it
No, it's
really
all good.
is just
Yeah.
mood
Yeah.
because road trips, I have a completely different
Oh,
playlist than
yeah.
I do taking,
Yep.
my kids to school or whatever. I
Yeah.
mean, and then we'll be, like going to Dave and Buster's and we'll listen to like the hype, just fun
Oh, yeah.
stuff. But
Yeah.
mood.
I gotcha. No, it's all good. What would you say has been your most adverse moment? And it doesn't have to be with insurance. It can just be with life in general.
My most adverse.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Um, there's been so many. I don't want to seem complicated, but I got
No,
a
that's
lot to
all good.
choose from.
Yeah.
Um, Most adverse. I don't know, Steve.
It's all good. I'm
I'm
gonna
sorry.
flip it. No,
I'm
you're fine.
so
No,
sorry.
that's all good. I'm gonna flip it on you and ask you what's been your most proud moment.
Um, well, both of my kids
Yeah.
have, they're pretty amazing kids. They're very amazing. I know Ruger just won or one of his wrestling matches because we just finished up like a tournament season,
Yeah.
and that was, I mean, I cried a little bit.
Sure.
So, that's always fun to watch. I mean, I don't have one particular times where my kids have succeeded where I've been like the most proud, but anytime anything, my
Yeah.
kids have succeeded. So
Yeah. It's always good to see them get ahead. You always want the best for
yeah.
your kids. So
Oh yeah.
yeah.
And I know that Lorelai's had some projects lately that, she did really good on, and she was super excited about that. Of course, when she danced, I always
Yeah.
loved, watching her and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
really
Yeah, absolutely.
everything my little babies do.
Well, there you go. Well, there are definitely some good kids. I crack up sometimes with some of the social media videos I
Oh
see where they're
goodness.
and they look like, I know they're like everybody else's kids when, when there's a brother and sister or a sister and sister or brother and brother.
Mm.
They get along good. They also have their moments where they don't want to be around each other. But the good part about your kids is, I think about the same thing that I have with my sister growing up is we can mess with each other, but if you mess with one of us, you better get ready.
Oh, I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
same. They
Yep.
do. They'll fight like cats and dogs, just because it's a Tuesday. And then, I'll walk in and they're just like cuddled on the couch and
Yep.
sleeping. And I'm like, again, little tears. Like, you
Yep.
guys are so cute when we
Yeah.
get along.
Absolutely. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for your time
Yeah, of
today. We certainly appreciate it. Again,
course.
for folks that are watching this, we're also going to have this on our website. So if for some reason you didn't have a chance to get the number or the email address, or maybe you just didn't have a way to take those down, you can check out the website. It'll be under our blog section, and you'll be able to not only watch this episode there, but get Rebecca's information as well to be
Great.
able to contact her with any insurance questions you may have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. It's good to see
Thank
you.
you, Rebecca. Good to see you too.